In July 2025, on a quiet stretch of farmland near Carnoustie, Scotland, archaeologists thought they were just surveying another ordinary field, rolling hills, green grass, nothing unusual, until the ground started giving up its secrets. Beneath what looked like untouched farmland, they uncovered massive ancient wooden beams, perfectly aligned and hidden for thousands of years. At first glance, it could have been dismissed as old logs buried by time, but this wasn't that simple, and it wasn't what anyone expected. These timbers belonged to a structure so massive and unprecedented that it could change everything. We thought we knew about early human history. This wasn't just another archaeological find. It predates Stonehenge by almost 1,000 years, hinting at a society far more organized, advanced, and mysterious than anyone imagined. Could this hidden monument force us to rethink Britain's earliest history? Could it mean there are more secrets buried beneath Scotland's fields, waiting quietly for us to uncover them? Until now, archaeologists believed that early Neolithic people in Britain lived in small, scattered groups, focused mainly on survival, hunting, farming, and building only simple shelters. But this discovery flips that assumption on its head. The scale, precision, and sheer ambition of this structure suggests something different. A society capable of advanced planning, collaboration, and monumental construction thousands of years earlier than we thought possible. And here's the dark reality. If this site hadn't been discovered, we would have kept believing a story about early human history that wasn't true. It makes you wonder how many other pieces of our past are still missing, buried beneath layers of soil and time. This single discovery doesn't just add a chapter to our history, it rewrites it. Suddenly, our entire understanding of Britain's earliest societies, their capabilities, and their culture is up for debate. It started like any ordinary day on the quiet farmlands near Carnoustie, Scotland, in July 2025. Rolling green fields stretched out beneath a pale summer sky, the kind of countryside where time feels slow and uneventful. Farmers had worked this land for generations, planting crops season after season, never imagining what lay just beneath their feet. When archaeologists arrived, it wasn't to chase legends or treasure. It was just a routine survey ahead of planned development. Nothing suggested that history itself was hiding here, but then something unusual happened. While scanning the area, researchers noticed strange shapes beneath the soil, using ground-penetrating radar. At first, the images looked like faint shadows, unusual symmetrical patterns that didn't match the chaotic randomness of natural formations, perfectly aligned lines, rectangular shapes. Something was down there, and it was man-made. The team decided to dig. The first trenches were shallow, careful cuts into the earth. The smell of damp soil filled the air as archaeologists brushed aside centuries of compacted earth, inch by inch. For a while, nothing surfaced, just more dirt, small rocks, and the occasional root snaking through the layers. But then, one researcher's trowel scraped across something unexpected: wood. At first, they assumed it was an old tree root, maybe part of a fallen log buried over time. But as they cleared away more soil, the texture and color became unmistakable. It wasn't just wood, it was timber. Massive, deliberately shaped oak beams, preserved perfectly beneath thousands of years of Scottish soil. And these weren't random pieces scattered by nature. The deeper they dug, the clearer it became. The beams were arranged, carefully placed in a deliberate, rectangular pattern, each timber aligned with precision, as though they'd been part of a structure, a huge one. The air around the trench grew electric with anticipation as the team realized they were standing on something far bigger than anyone expected. Over the next several days, more timbers were revealed, each one hewn by hand, smoothed by stone tools, and placed exactly where it needed to be. Archaeologists carefully traced their layout, brushing away centuries of earth, documenting every beam. The more they uncovered, the larger the structure became, stretching across the farmland beneath their feet. Word began to spread. Soon, specialists from across Britain arrived to see the site firsthand. The discovery was no longer just an anomaly on a radar scan. It was becoming one of the most significant archaeological finds in decades. Dr. Susan McKay, one of the lead archaeologists, recalled the moment vividly. When we brushed the soil, away from the first massive timber, the entire team went silent. We realized we were touching something no human had seen for thousands of years. It's one of those moments where you feel the weight of history pressing in on you. And the weight of history indeed was staggering. The emerging structure measured 35 meters long and 9 meters wide, about the size of a modern tennis court, but built 6,000 years ago. That scale alone shocked researchers. Until now, most believed that Britain's earliest Neolithic communities lacked the social organization or tools to attempt something this ambitious. Yet here it was, undeniable evidence of advanced planning, collaboration, and craftsmanship. The soil around the beams told its own story. Embedded alongside the timbers were pottery shards, fragments of animal bones, and the faint remnants of charred earth, suggesting the presence of communal hearths. Theories began forming rapidly. Was this an ancient meeting hall? A ceremonial center? A place where entire communities gathered for feasts, trade, or rituals? Every new discovery deepened the mystery. Some timbers were still upright, standing, exactly as they had thousands of years ago. Others had fallen in place, untouched, since the day the structure was abandoned. Tool marks carved into the oak revealed astonishing detail. These builders weren't working randomly. They planned, measured, and executed their vision with precision, using only stone tools and sheer ingenuity. The sheer preservation was almost eerie. It was as though the earth itself had been protecting this secret, locking away an entire chapter of human history until someone stumbled upon the key. For archaeologists, it felt like stepping into a time capsule, a chance to peer directly into the lives of people who lived 6 millennia ago. And yet, the deeper they dug, the more questions emerged. Who were these builders? How did they organize? The labor required to cut, shape, and transport such massive timbers, and why, after pouring so much effort into creating this monumental structure, did they abandon it, leaving it to be swallowed by the earth for thousands of years? As experts documented the site, a bigger picture began to form. The builders weren't isolated hunter-gatherers struggling for survival. They were skilled, coordinated, and connected, part of a network of early farming communities spread across Scotland and beyond. Similar architectural styles had been found in Northern Europe, suggesting these people shared knowledge, techniques, and cultural traditions across vast distances. But here in Carnoustie, there was something unique. Unlike the stone monuments that dominate Britain's prehistoric narrative, Stonehenge, Avebury, and others, this was timber that rarely survives the test of time, vanishing into the soil long before archaeologists can find it. And yet, somehow, these beams endured, preserved perfectly beneath layers of protective sediment, waiting for this moment in history to be revealed. Standing at the edge of the excavation site, archaeologists describe a powerful sense of connection. Looking down at the timbers, they imagined the people who once stood here, tending fires, sharing food, performing ceremonies, or debating decisions that shaped their community. For a fleeting moment, 6,000 years collapsed into the present, and this was just the beginning. What started as a routine survey had transformed into a discovery that could rewrite Britain's early history. With every timber uncovered, the mystery deepened, a silent reminder that so much of our past remains buried, waiting to be found. Standing over the uncovered timbers, archaeologists quickly realized they weren't just looking at another Neolithic settlement. They were staring at a structure so massive, deliberate, and sophisticated that it challenged nearly every assumption about early human history in Britain. Measuring roughly 35 meters long and 9 meters wide, the Carnoustie Timber Hall stretched across the earth like a buried monument, a Neolithic cathedral built nearly 6,000 years ago. To put its size into perspective, imagine a modern tennis court. Now stretch it even further. This wasn't just a hut or a gathering spot for a small clan. This was monumental architecture, constructed at a time when people supposedly lacked the tools, organization, and technology to achieve something on this scale. And yet, beam by beam, soil layer by soil layer, the evidence said otherwise. Each timber was cut from oak trees that once towered in the surrounding forests, carefully selected, shaped, and positioned with extraordinary precision. Using only stone axes and handmade tools, the builders managed to carve straight, smooth edges into logs so massive that it would have taken entire teams just to transport them. When experts examined the beams, they found distinct tool marks, perfectly consistent across multiple timbers, suggesting coordinated craftsmanship, not random improvisation. This wasn't the work of scattered, struggling farmers. This was the work of a highly organized society. Inside the structure, the story became even more intriguing. Archaeologists found evidence of multiple hearths, carefully arranged along the central line of the hall. These weren't casual campfires, they were intentionally placed at regular intervals, each surrounded by stones blackened with soot and ash. The arrangement suggested zones within the hall, areas designed for different groups, activities, or ceremonies. Imagine walking into the structure 6,000 years ago. Towering oak posts rose high above your head, a massive timber roof stretched overhead, and along the center, glowing fires lit up faces gathered for feasts, rituals, or critical decisions that shaped entire communities. The placement of the timbers themselves told another part of the story. They weren't randomly set into the ground. They were installed at consistent depths and evenly spaced, forming a perfect rectangular grid. Archaeologists concluded that the builders had followed a deliberate architectural plan, one that would have required mapping, measuring, and communal coordination. For a society without writing, blueprints, or advanced engineering tools, this level of precision was astonishing. And yet, perhaps the most haunting aspect of the structure wasn't its size. It was its purpose. Fragments of decorated pottery scattered near the central hearths suggest that communal feasting was a major activity here. Large storage vessels and cooking pots indicate food preparation on a scale far beyond what a single family or small village would need. Alongside the pottery, archaeologists uncovered thousands of animal bones, mostly from cattle, sheep, and pigs, many showing signs of deliberate butchering. Combined, these finds point toward massive gatherings, where entire communities may have come together to share food, trade goods, and strengthen social bonds. But feasting wasn't the whole story. There's growing evidence that the hall also held ceremonial and administrative importance. Smooth stone paving found near the entrances suggests that stepping inside the hall wasn't casual. It was significant. These stones weren't placed for practicality, they were placed to impress. It's as though entering this space meant crossing into a realm of power, tradition, and shared identity. Dr. Susan McKay, one of the lead researchers at the site, put it best. When you stand inside the excavated footprint of this hall, you can feel the scale of what they built. This wasn't a shelter, it was a statement. Whoever constructed this wanted to be remembered. They wanted everyone who entered to understand the importance of this place. And that's where the story takes a darker turn. The very existence of the Carnoustie Timber Hall forces archaeologists to reconsider just how advanced these Neolithic societies really were. For decades, we've imagined them as small, primitive groups struggling to survive. Yet here's evidence that 6,000 years ago, they were capable of organizing hundreds of people, mobilizing massive resources, and constructing buildings more sophisticated than we thought possible. If they could achieve this, what else were they doing that we haven't uncovered yet? And if structures like this existed, why have so few survived? The uncomfortable answer lies in the material itself. Timber rots, stone survives. For centuries, archaeology has been biased toward monuments built from stone, because stone lasts, but wood disappears. That means our entire understanding of early human history could be incomplete, distorted by the luck of preservation. This raises a haunting possibility. There may have been dozens, maybe hundreds of monumental timber halls across Britain and Northern Europe, entire networks of meeting places, ceremonial centers, and proto-governance hubs that have simply vanished into the earth. How many chapters of human history are missing simply because the materials didn't endure? And yet this one survived, preserved beneath centuries of soil, protected by perfect environmental conditions. The Carnoustie Timber Hall offers an almost impossible glimpse into a lost architectural tradition. Experts now believe its builders belonged to a highly connected network of early farming communities, exchanging ideas and technologies across vast distances. Similar designs have been uncovered in Germany and Denmark, suggesting that 6,000 years ago, long before written records, there was already a shared cultural blueprint spreading across Northern Europe. But here's the eerie part. Unlike later stone monuments such as Stonehenge, this hall wasn't designed to stand forever. Its builders must have known timber would decay over time, and yet they built it anyway, pouring immense labor into something they understood was temporary. Why? Was the act of building itself part of the ceremony? Was it about creating a space that was meant to live and die with the community? Or did they expect to return, only to abandon it for reasons we still don't understand? What happened inside those towering walls? Were alliances formed here, rituals performed, disputes resolved? Was this a place where leaders gathered to control vast regions, or a communal sanctuary where multiple groups came together under shared traditions? Every artifact pulled from the soil, every pottery shard, animal bone, and charred stone adds another piece to the puzzle, but the complete picture remains frustratingly out of reach. And then there's the ultimate question. Why was it abandoned? Some researchers speculate environmental pressures, changes in climate, dwindling resources, or flooding may have forced communities to leave. Others believe social or spiritual shifts could have led them to walk away deliberately, leaving behind the very heart of their communal identity. Whatever the reason, the silence surrounding the site for thousands of years adds a weight of mystery that no amount of technology can fully explain. Today, standing on that quiet Scottish farmland, you wouldn't guess that beneath the rolling grass lies a story capable of rewriting everything we thought we knew about early Britain. But the beams, the layout, the artifacts, they all speak to a hidden sophistication, a society far more complex than history has ever credited them. For the Carnoustie Timber Hall is not just an archaeological site. It's a message from the past, one that challenges us to rethink our assumptions, to reconsider the narrative we've built about human progress, and to confront the reality that most of our history is still buried, forgotten, and waiting. And as researchers continue to uncover its secrets, one thing is certain: this structure is more than a building. It's proof that 6,000 years ago, humans were already dreaming bigger, reaching further, and building monuments to meaning, even when they knew time itself would eventually erase them. To understand the Carnoustie Timber Hall, we have to travel back nearly 6,000 years to around 4000 BC, when the first farming communities were beginning to take root across Britain and Northern Europe. Picture a world without cities, without writing, without metal tools or wheels. a world where survival depended entirely on seasons, weather, and cooperation. Life was fragile, but it was also changing, and these builders were right at the heart of that transformation. Before this period, Britain was dominated by small, nomadic groups of hunter-gatherers. Families moved constantly, following herds, foraging wild berries, and fishing along coasts and rivers. But around 4000 BC, everything shifted. Agriculture arrived, carried by migrating farmers from continental Europe. People learned to grow barley and wheat, to tame animals, and to settle in one place for the first time in history. It's hard to overstate how monumental that change was. Farming meant stability. Stability meant population growth. And growth meant people had the time, energy, and reason to build, not just shelters, but structures that carried meaning, identity, and power. This is the world the Carnoustie builders were born into, one of innovation, collaboration, and transformation. And yet, standing at the site of the Timber Hall today, archaeologists are left stunned by what these people accomplished. Because here's the reality. These builders weren't supposed to exist, according to what historians believed until now. Neolithic communities in Britain were thought to be small, scattered, and unsophisticated, struggling to survive and limited to simple huts or temporary shelters. But the Carnoustie Timber Hall tells a different story, one of a society capable of advanced planning, large-scale organization, and incredible craftsmanship. They didn't just survive, they thrived. They thrived. Think about the challenge they faced. These people built a 35-meter-long, 9-meter-wide hall, the size of a modern tennis court, using stone axes, wooden mallets, and handmade tools carved from bone and flint. No metal saws, no modern machinery. Every oak beam had to be felled, shaped, and transported, using pure muscle, teamwork, and ingenuity. Archaeologists studying the site believe hundreds of people from surrounding communities may have come together for the construction. Some cut the oaks, others stripped the bark, while groups hauled the massive logs using ropes woven from plant fibers. And somehow, without writing or blueprints, they achieved a perfectly aligned structure with timbers spaced evenly and posts placed at consistent depths, a feat of precision engineering thousands of years ahead of its time. This level of coordination tells us something crucial. These weren't isolated tribes competing for survival. They were part of larger networks, connected through trade, marriage, and shared cultural practices. The Carnoustie Timber Hall wasn't just a building, it was likely a central hub for multiple communities, a place where people gathered for ceremonies, feasts, trade, and possibly governance. And this isn't unique to Scotland. Across northern Europe, archaeologists have discovered similar Neolithic timber halls, especially in places like Germany, Denmark, and the Netherlands. At Lübstorf in Germany, massive wooden longhouses dating back nearly 7,000 years have been found, their layouts strikingly similar to Carnoustie's. In Denmark, long rectangular halls served as communal centers for farming societies, blending practical functions with ceremonial importance. These similarities suggest something profound. There was a shared cultural blueprint spreading across early Europe. Ideas weren't locked within small villages. They moved with people, carried along by migration, trade, and storytelling. The builders of Carnoustie were part of this larger exchange, drawing inspiration from techniques and traditions already thriving on the continent while adapting them to Scotland's rugged environment. But there's another layer to this story, one that gives the discovery a much darker edge. For centuries, our understanding of early human history has been shaped by what survives. Stone monuments like Stonehenge, Avebury, and Callanish dominate Britain's prehistoric narrative because stone lasts forever, but timber rots. And because wood disappears, entire chapters of our past have vanished silently beneath the soil. The Carnoustie Timber Hall is an exceptional miracle of preservation, surviving only because environmental conditions sealed it beneath protective layers. That means what we know about early societies, their abilities, their creativity, their ambitions may be wildly incomplete. We might be missing hundreds of sites like this one. Entire networks of monumental timber halls, ceremonial centers, and communal spaces could once have spread across Britain and Europe, leaving almost no trace. And that forces us to ask an unsettling question. How much of human history has already been lost? The surviving artifacts give us tantalizing glimpses into the lives of Carnousties builders. Pottery fragments suggest they were skilled artisans, decorating vessels not just for storage, but for expression and identity. Animal bones show evidence of communal feasting, meaning this wasn't just a private family dwelling. It was a place where entire groups came together, maybe hundreds at a time, to celebrate trade and solidify alliances. Archaeologists have also uncovered grain remnants near the site, showing that the builders were advanced farmers who cultivated barley and wheat on surrounding fields. Early domestication of cattle, sheep, and pigs provided steady food supplies and resources like milk, hides, and bone tools. These weren't survivalists clinging to life. They were innovators, reshaping the land around them to support permanent, thriving communities. What's more, traces of stone paving near entrances and carefully carved post holes inside the hall point towards symbolic design choices. This wasn't just about function, it was about meaning. Walking into the hall, likely, carried ritual weight. Every detail, from the placement of hearths to the alignment of timbers, seems intentional, suggesting a society deeply attuned to spirituality, ceremony, and collective identity. And yet, for all their achievements, this chapter of human history ended in silence. At some point, the builders of Carnoustie abandoned their magnificent hall. The reasons remain a mystery. Perhaps environmental pressures, floods, droughts, or changing climate drove them away. Perhaps new beliefs or power shifts made the site obsolete. Whatever the cause, the people left, and the earth slowly swallowed their creation. For thousands of years, wind and rain covered the timbers, erasing their story from memory. Until now. The rediscovery of the Carnoustie Timber Hall doesn't just add to our understanding of Britain's early societies. It rewrites it entirely. Far from being primitive, these people were connected, ambitious, and capable of engineering feats we've long underestimated. And if one structure like this survived, how many more might still lie hidden beneath Scotland's fields, forests, and coastlines? In a way, the builders of Carnoustie are speaking to us across 6 millennia. They're telling us that human ingenuity, collaboration, and creativity didn't begin with written history or stone monuments. They began much earlier, in communities like theirs. And yet, they're also reminding us of something darker. That time erases almost everything. We are left with fragments, beams buried in mud, pottery shards, animal bones, tiny whispers of entire lives and entire worlds. And as archaeologists piece together those fragments, they realize how fragile our understanding truly is. What we think we know about the past may be only a fraction of the real story. The Carnoustie Timber Hall isn't just a discovery. It's an invitation to look deeper, to question assumptions, and to recognize that our earliest ancestors were far more capable, connected, and complex than history has given them credit for. And it leaves us with an unsettling thought. If this structure remained hidden for 6,000 years, what else lies buried, waiting to rewrite everything we think we know? When archaeologists uncovered the Carnoustie Timber Hall, one question immediately rose above all the others. Why? Why would early Neolithic people living 6,000 years ago go to such extraordinary lengths to build something so massive, so deliberate, and so far beyond what anyone thought they were capable of? The evidence scattered across the site offers clues, but no single definitive answer. Each fragment, every pottery shard, animal bone, and charred hearthstone whispers a different possibility. And the deeper researchers dig, the clearer it becomes. This wasn't just a building. It was a stage where something deeply significant unfolded, and yet the meaning remains elusive. The first theory is one of communal feasting, and the evidence is compelling. Among the soil layers near the central hearths, archaeologists unearthed thousands of animal bones, mostly from cattle, sheep, and pigs. But these weren't ordinary food scraps. The bones were deliberately butchered and burned, suggesting organized preparation for large-scale feasts. Imagine entire communities gathered together, fires blazing down the hall, the scent of roasting meat filling the air. For people living at the edge of survival, these weren't casual meals. They were monumental events requiring significant planning, resource pooling, and coordination. Some researchers believe these feasts may have served a symbolic purpose as much as a practical one. By bringing together different families, clans, or even neighboring settlements, the builders may have been strengthening alliances and reinforcing community identity. In a world without written contracts or legal systems, sharing food and ceremony could have been the glue holding entire regions together. But not everyone agrees that celebration alone explains a hall of this size and complexity. Another theory is that the Carnoustie timber hall acted as a kind of governance center, an early administrative hub where leaders from surrounding communities met to make decisions, settle disputes, and manage resources. The layout of the structure supports this idea. Evenly spaced hearths running down the center suggest different zones, perhaps designated for separate groups or social ranks. The presence of carefully paved stone entrances implies that entering the hall itself carried weight and meaning, perhaps reserved for those with authority. In this view, the hall wasn't just a place to eat or celebrate. It was a place to rule. Dr. Ewan Fletcher, one of the lead archaeologists on the project, explains it this way. When you consider the sheer scale of the timber hall, you realize it wasn't designed for everyday living. This was a space intended to impress, a place where decisions were made, alliances were formed, and power was demonstrated. If that's true, then the hall could represent one of the earliest examples of organized governance in Britain, predating systems of hierarchy we previously thought emerged thousands of years later. But there's a third theory, and it dives even deeper into the spiritual and symbolic. Some archaeologists suggest that the Carnoustie Timber Hall may have served as a ceremonial or ritual center, a sacred space where communities gathered to connect with ancestors, celebrate seasonal cycles, or perform rites tied to life and death. Evidence for this comes from the central hearths, which may not have been purely functional. Their perfect alignment and the traces of carefully curated stones around them suggest they held symbolic significance. Pottery fragments discovered nearby add to this theory. Many were intricately decorated, far beyond what would be needed for simple storage. Some patterns seem repetitive, even intentional, hinting at designs tied to belief systems or shared cultural identities. To the builders of Carnoustie, these objects may have carried meaning we can no longer fully decode, and this opens up a darker possibility, one that researchers whisper about but rarely claim outright. What if this hall was a place where ritual and authority collided? A space where ceremonial practices blended with social control. Some believe the central hearths weren't just for feasting. They may have marked divisions of power, separating those who led from those who followed. The paved entrances, the size of the structure, and the sheer labor invested suggest this hall wasn't for everyone. Access could have been restricted, and the ceremonies inside meant to reinforce hierarchies within a growing, complex society. But despite these competing theories, one thing is certain. This was not an ordinary space. The Carnoustie Timber Hall, required enormous collective effort to build. Hundreds of trees felled, transported, shaped, and perfectly aligned. Multiple communities likely came together, coordinated through shared traditions and common purpose. Whatever happened inside these walls, it mattered enough to mobilize an entire region's resources and labor, something that, until this discovery, archaeologists never thought early Neolithic societies were capable of. And yet, the mystery deepens when we ask the inevitable question, why was it abandoned? If this was a ceremonial site, what caused people to turn away from it? If it was a governance hub, what power shift made it irrelevant? Some researchers believe climate pressures or changing food supplies might have driven populations elsewhere. Others suggest cultural transformations, new belief systems, migrations, or conflicts rendered the hall obsolete. But there's a more haunting possibility still. Perhaps its abandonment was intentional. Some researchers argue the hall might have been ritually closed, decommissioned in a deliberate act meant to mark the end of its purpose. Over time, Earth reclaimed it, burying its secrets beneath the farmland, where it would remain hidden for 6,000 years. And here's where the story takes a darker turn. If the Carnoustie Timber Hall really was a site of feasts, governance, and ceremony, it implies a level of social complexity in early Britain we've never fully appreciated. These weren't just small groups of farmers scraping by in isolation. They were networked, sophisticated communities capable of building monumental structures, organizing shared traditions, and creating systems of meaning that bound people together. But what does it mean that so much of this history is missing? The Timber Hall survived only because of a rare combination of soil, moisture, and chance. Without it, we would still believe a much simpler story about Britain's earliest societies, a story where nothing this ambitious could have existed. And that realization forces us to confront an unsettling truth. For every Carnoustie we uncover, there may be dozens of others erased completely, their timbers rotted, their fires extinguished, their meanings lost forever. The hall itself leaves behind tantalizing clues, but no definitive answers. Were its walls filled with celebration, debate, and ceremony, or something stranger, something we haven't yet imagined? The animal bones, the pottery, the paving stones, the hearths, they speak, but they don't reveal everything, and maybe they never will. In the end, the Carnoustie Timber Hall sits at the crossroads of community, power, and belief. It may have been all of these things at once, a place where people ate together, ruled together, and dreamed together, blurring the lines between the sacred and the political. Or perhaps it was something we haven't begun to understand, a tradition so foreign to us that its meaning remains beyond our reach. For now, the hall keeps its secrets, and maybe that's the most haunting part of all. When people think of Britain's ancient past, one name dominates the imagination: Stonehenge. Towering stones aligned with the sun, mysterious origins, and endless theories about its builders, is one of the world's most famous prehistoric monuments. For decades, we believed Stonehenge represented the pinnacle of Britain's early engineering, the moment when scattered farming communities came together to build something bigger than themselves. But the discovery of the Carnoustie Timber Hall forces us to rethink that entire timeline. Because here's the shocking truth. This wooden monument predates Stonehenge by nearly 1,000 years. Built around 4000 BC, the Carnoustie Timber Hall existed at a time when most experts assumed Neolithic Britain was still in its infancy, populated by small, independent groups with little social organization. Yet this single site tells a different story, one of advanced planning, communal effort, and monumental ambition long before the first stones at Stonehenge were ever lifted into place. And the differences don't stop at age. Where Stonehenge used enormous standing stones, Carnoustie relied on timber, a choice that changes everything we thought we understood about early British monuments. Unlike stone, timber doesn't endure. It vanishes with time, erased by moisture and soil. That's why discoveries like Carnoustie are so rare and why its survival feels almost miraculous. It also suggests something darker. If this hall survived, purely by chance, how many other monumental wooden structures have disappeared completely, lost to history without leaving a trace? The comparison becomes even more fascinating when we look at scale and design. Stonehenge's stone circle measures about 33 meters in diameter. Impressive. When you zoom out, a fascinating pattern emerges. Across Europe, Neolithic societies were connected, sharing technologies, traditions, and architectural ideas across hundreds of miles long before written language existed. The Carnoustie timber hall isn't an isolated mystery. It's part of a much larger cultural movement, one that transcended borders and reveals just how advanced these early communities truly were. But here's where the comparisons take a darker turn. Because while stone monuments like Stonehenge, Avebury, and Orkney's ceremonial complexes dominate our understanding of prehistory, they've survived mainly because stone lasts. Timber structures, by contrast, have almost entirely vanished, eaten away by time, soil, and water. That means our entire picture of early Britain has been built on what we can still see, not necessarily what was most common. The Carnoustie discovery exposes a troubling possibility. The monuments we've celebrated for centuries, the stone, circles, megaliths, and tombs, might represent only the smallest fraction of a much larger story. If monumental timber halls once covered Britain's countryside, centers of gathering, ritual, and governance, then our entire understanding of early society is skewed. We've been looking at the survivors, not the full history. Dr. Susan McKay, one of the lead archaeologists at Carnoustie, explains Stonehenge tells one story, Carnoustie tells another. For every structure that survives, there may be dozens we've lost. Without finds like this, we'd never realize just how advanced these societies were, or how much history has already disappeared beneath our feet. That's what makes Carnoustie so vital. It fills in the gaps between what we thought we knew and the realities we're only now beginning to uncover. It proves that thousands of years before Britain's great stone monuments, there were already organized communities capable of complex engineering, ceremonial traditions, and cross-regional connections. And yet, it raises just as many questions as it answers. Why did societies eventually shift from timber to stone? Was it simply practicality? Stone lasts longer, standing as a permanent marker for future generations? Or was it symbolic, a statement of dominance, power, or spiritual permanence? If so, was Carnoustie part of an earlier phase of Neolithic monument building, one where people experimented with wood before realizing the enduring legacy of stone? And perhaps most hauntingly, what else lies buried beneath Britain and Europe? If one timber hall survived only by luck, how many others are hidden, erased, or waiting to be rediscovered? For every uncovered site, there may be an entire network of gathering places, ceremonial centers, and trading hubs lost to time. This discovery doesn't diminish the significance of Stonehenge, Avebury, or Orkney. It enriches them. It shows that Britain's Neolithic story didn't begin with stone. It began earlier, deeper, and in ways we never expected. Carnoustie forces us to rethink not only the timeline, but also the complexity of the people themselves. Far from isolated farmers struggling to survive, these were visionaries, sharing ideas across borders, reshaping their environment, and building spaces that defined their identities. The more we compare, the clearer it becomes. The Carnoustie timber hall isn't just another discovery. It's a missing chapter in the story of human history. It reveals a world where innovation, connection, and monumental ambition flourished long before history remembers. And it forces us to face an unsettling truth. What we think we know about the past may be only a shadow of what truly existed. Because if this hall, hidden beneath farmland for 6,000 years, can rewrite the narrative, what else is waiting in silence? Beneath our feet, the discovery of the Carnoustie Timber Hall has rewritten everything we thought we knew about Britain's earliest societies. What we once imagined as small, scattered groups of farmers and foragers struggling to survive now looks entirely different. 6,000 years ago, communities were gathering, planning, and building monuments of staggering scale, long before Stonehenge ever rose on the horizon. But here's the thing. We've only scratched the surface. This hall survived by pure chance, protected beneath layers of soil for thousands of years. And that forces us to ask, how many other monumental structures have been lost to time? How many vast timber halls, ceremonial centers, and gathering spaces once stood across Britain and Europe, their stories erased by decay, their memories swallowed by the earth? Modern technology, LiDAR scans, radar imaging, and aerial mapping is beginning to peel back those layers, revealing shapes and patterns hidden for millennia. With every year, more discoveries emerge. Each new site changes the story, proving that early human history was far richer, more complex, and more connected than we ever believed. And yet, for every uncovered artifact, there are questions we can't answer. Who walked these halls? What ceremonies were held here? What decisions were made beneath the glow of those ancient hearths? And perhaps most hauntingly, why did they leave? The Carnoustie Timber Hall stands as both a revelation and a revelation of what early societies could achieve, and a reminder of how fragile history truly is. For every secret unearthed, countless others remain buried beneath our feet, waiting for the right moment, or perhaps the right technology, to bring them back into the light. So maybe the real story isn't just about one hall in Scotland. Maybe it's about everything we've lost, and everything still hidden. One thing's certain, the past is far more mysterious and far more alive than we've ever imagined. And this is only the beginning. If discoveries like the Carnoustie Timber Hall can rewrite everything we thought we knew about our past, imagine what else is still buried beneath our feet, waiting to be found. If you want to keep uncovering these hidden stories with us, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, because we're just getting started. Every week, we dive deeper into the secrets of our ancient world, exploring the mysteries history has forgotten, and the ones we haven't even discovered yet. Who knows? The next find could change everything we thought we knew, and you won't want to miss it.